Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lisa Walbert with LiveWell Colorado, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. I have a few housekeeping items to cover before we get started. First, we'll be recording this webinar, and it will be available beginning tomorrow morning on LiveWell Colorado's website. It will also be on coloradofarmtoschool.org website. To access on LiveWell Colorado's website, you simply visit livewellcolorado.org, visit the toolbox, and select Webinars in the toolbox menu. We'll also have some time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. If possible, please let us know who your question is directed to when you ask it. To ask a question, simply type it into the Questions tab on your on-screen control panel. So to get started, today's webinar is our sixth in a series on Farm to School in Colorado that have been co-hosted by LiveWell Colorado and the Colorado Farm to School Project. Today's topic is the Farm to School bid process, and we have some great examples of successful RFPs and proposals to help both schools and producers move forward with this process. And I'm controlling my slides and they're not moving, so 1 minute. Okay. So the objectives for today's call are to learn about frequently asked questions concerning the Geographic Preference rule as a producer and as a school district, to see examples of how to apply Geographic Preference on paper, and to learn from some school districts and producers as they walk through their specific bid processes. We have a number of great presentations coming, although a few changes in our lineup, I believe. We'll hear about the Colorado Farm to School project from Wendy Peters-Moschetti instead of Lynn Kathleen today. They're partners along with Jim Dyer on that project. We'll hear from Tabor Ward from CDPHE on understanding geographic preference. We'll hear from Krista Gerard about what's happening in Durango. From Paula Busser regarding Canyon City outreach to producers, and Tammy Rempe on Northern Colorado's cooperative bid. And then we're fortunate to have Karen McManus with us, who brings a number of different perspectives to provide some closing thoughts. And then we will open it up for questions at the end. So please feel free to capture your questions as you go along. In fact, that's quite helpful for us so that we make sure we can get them to the right folks to answer them. And with that, let's see, I think I talked through who our different presenters are, but so you can see some quick pictures. We're missing Tammy's picture, but we thought that was a nice representation, a nice shiny apple. And as I mentioned, Wendy Peters-Moschetti is taking Lynn Kathleen's place today. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Wendy.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Wendy. And as Lisa said, I'll be talking today, and my email is available later in the presentation as well as Lynn. So as Lisa mentioned, along with Lynn Kathleen at Spark Policy Institute and Jim Dyer with Healthy Community Food Systems out of La Plata County, and myself with WPM Consulting, we staff Colorado Farm to School. And if you've been on these webinars or know about us before, you know who we are. We are funded through our Colorado Department of Agriculture a Specialty Crops Grant. And we are in our third and final year of that funding. And hopefully very obviously, because of our name, we have been created to develop resources and tools to better help connect school districts and producers with one another and make that relationship easier for everyone. So what I want to do really quickly before we get into hearing about some specific processes from our school districts is just to flag a few resources that we do provide as Colorado Farm to School. So as this slide shows, we have resources that we feel are very directed specifically to school districts, primarily tools for food service directors. The first one, the Colorado Farm to School Primer, was actually developed with LiveWell Colorado and is a beautiful, very digestible guide that really kind of orients all sorts of different stakeholders and audiences to what is Farm to School, how to really begin this movement locally, where to go for more information, how to understand school services, and more. Related, the overview of school food procurement in Colorado is a very lengthy document that sort of walks folks through what the school food operations and budgets and federal and state funding sort of look like in Colorado. Other resources that we have, and I should say these are all available on our website, which we do list several times in this webinar, which is coloradofarmtoschool.org. Other resources, the rest of these on the slide were created by Colorado Farm to School. How-to resources is a comprehensive guide, which is a bunch of links essentially to how to get started, how to find funding, how to work with producers, a series of sort of topical resources on doing farm to school. We have a tip sheet on finding and knowing local farmers. We have a series of case studies, 7 case studies that are beautiful. They're all up on our website that explore in-depth topics around doing farm to school. For example, we have one just on food safety, and one just on contracting, and one on school gardens and youth farmers markets. So we are also building on those case studies this year. Those were published about a year ago. Colorado Farm to School, in partnership with LiveWell Colorado, is developing another series of case studies as we speak, so keep your eyes open. We also have compiled a comprehensive sort of database of farm to school curricula. And lastly, we have the Choose Your Own Farm to School Adventure tool, which we feel is like it's sort of a self-review tool for school district food service directors to sort of assess your opportunities. So the next slide highlights some resources that we did not develop as Colorado Farm to School, but are highlighted on our website. Colorado Market Maker. The webinar we did in December was actually on Colorado Market Maker. So if you're interested in using a resource, an online resource where you can register as a school district or as a producer and flag that you're interested specifically in farm to school and find each other, this is the place to do it. You can go online to access our December webinar that was specifically on Market Maker. We also have links to other resources like Colorado Farm to Market, which walks people product by product through sort of the food safety licensing process, and other resources developed by CSU and CSU Extension. And then to connect with us, there's a variety of ways. This is our staff again. We have 2 current surveys we'd love for folks to fill out. We have a producer-specific survey out right now. Here's the link. Again, this webinar is available to you later if you can't write this down right now. We would really like to understand more from producers and their own individual voices, really what are some opportunities and barriers around farm to school. So if you are a producer or know one, please encourage them to complete the survey. We also have a standing survey that you can fill out if you're requesting technical assistance through us, and that is the second link. And then one other specific project that we are working on right now is we are collecting nominations for what we're calling Farm to School Champions. And we would love for you, this is not a competition, so it's not like whoever gets the most votes wins or anything. We're going to highlight everybody, but we're just asking you all, if there's someone you know of that is maybe an unsung hero, maybe a high school student that's really championed the school garden, or a mom or a dad that's really been important in working with the school board and really institutionalizing farm to school, or someone that's been instrumental that maybe we don't know about, especially we'd really love to hear about this person and help them brag a little bit about what they've done and share their story. So there's a link to one more survey there, SurveyMonkey, where you can nominate a champion. It's very simple. It'll take about 30 seconds to nominate somebody. And we just wanted to flag lastly that, as Lisa said, this is an ongoing series of webinars. We do not have actual dates nailed down yet, so keep your eyes open. But over the next 3 months, we will be looking at youth farmers markets, at school gardens, and not just school gardens, but how they're used. Food is integrated into cafeterias, and students are involved in composting and the whole process. And then in June, we will be walking through a specific grant template school districts can use to obtain farm to school equipment and materials. So that is us. Here's our website. Please contact us. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks.
So thank you, Wendy. And we will provide all of those links in a follow-up email along with the link to the recording sometime tomorrow. So next up, we will hear from Tabor Ward, who's going to talk about geographic preference and really understanding the USDA's local procurement rules. So Tabor, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. Thank you for the introduction. I am Tabor Ward, a senior law clerk at CDPHE, and today I'm just here to give a brief background overview and introduce some references to help you in your farm-to-school partners feel confident in implementing geographic preference. Next slide, please. So first, a little bit about CDPHE and farm-to-school. We do work to fund and facilitate the farm-to-school task force to help connect kids to fresh farm foods. We collaborate with partners such as LiveWell to ensure access to healthy food choices in different Colorado communities. We also fund and facilitate culinary boot camps, again with LiveWell Colorado, to teach food service workers about scratch cooking, how to purchase, prepare, and serve healthier foods in schools. And we also provide technical assistance in this case, for example, helping to do a legal interpretation of geographic preference. Next slide, please. So just a little background on what is geographic preference. It came from the 2008 Farm Bill, where the Secretary of Agriculture was mandated to encourage institutions operating child nutrition programs to purchase unprocessed, locally grown, and locally raised agricultural products. So unprocessed, and I think we'll get into this a little bit later in the slides as well, the foods must maintain their inherent character. But some minimally processed will count, things that are frozen, single-serving portions, ground beef, and other ground products with no additives or preservatives. So anything frozen, ground, chopped, and bagged is usually okay. Canned goods are not okay. Locally grown and locally raised is not established in the legislation, so that's something that the school districts define on their own. Simply put, the geographic preference option helps schools purchase locally grown foods. Next slide, please. So if you want to look at the official language of the geographic preference regulations, they're listed here. This is on the Food and Nutrition Services website of the USDA, the federal regulation website. And these could just be, if you really wanted to just go to the original text, see what the regulations are, you can find the text at either of these two links. So with assistance from our partners, CDPHE tried to simplify these regulations and break down these regulations by producing two question and answers. The first is for Colorado farmers, producers, and vendors, and the second is for Colorado school food purchasers. Next slide, please. Again, you can download these on your own. Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment's Preventative Services Division has a website called CoPrevent, and here's a link to the website. Here's what the two documents look like. So if you want to go to the website and download these Q&As yourself, this is a great place to do it. I'm just going to talk about them briefly in this webinar. Next slide. Thank you. So, for example, the first question and answer includes some legal analysis and answers to questions, including broad questions. What is geographic preference? How can my farm benefit? And this is something you can distribute to your farmers, producers, vendors, or farmers, producers, and vendors can access on this website. And just to give a little bit of a background of how they can get involved with Farm to School. How can the farm qualify? The answer to this goes through the local and unprocessed criteria that the farm must follow to qualify for a geographic preference option. And finally, how do local farms get a preference in the bidding process? The answer to this question basically goes over the basic invitation for bid process and talks a little bit about how geographic preference is different than the normal price calculations that schools have to use, how invitations for bids takes in local geography as well as price. Next slide, please. And the question and answer for school food purchasing, it's similar to the one directed at farmers, but it's a little bit more technical. It does go through, again, the broader questions. What is geographic preference? Why would a school benefit from it? It talks about, could a school food authority require that food be purchased for school meals? And the simple answer to that is no. It can't include language like we will only accept locally grown products. But then the question and answer does go through, what can you include in a bid solicitation? You can say things like, picked within 1 day of delivery, or traveled less than 100 miles or 15 hours. So it gives some tips on how to write these invitations for bids without breaking the law and officially requiring, because that isn't allowed. The real groundbreaking thing about geographic preference is that it involves other factors other than price when schools are making these decisions. So it still looks at how price is taken into this equation, but also how geography and local preference can be used. So it talks, as we see in number 3, how much weight do you have to give price when considering local bids. And finally, the fourth point is breaking down the formal versus informal process. Sort of talks a little bit about what informal purchasing is. That's the small purchase threshold. So if the school is purchasing food under a certain amount of money, then they can go through the informal process, and you can still use geographic preference. So this question sort of goes over these different formal versus informal strategies that schools can use. So these are just examples of the questions. The question and answers have a lot more questions and answers that might be helpful to you. So just wanted to give you a little flavor of what you'll find on there. And that's it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Tabor. And as I said, following Wendy's piece, you're going to see a lot of URLs and links in here, and they will be available in the slides that will be posted tomorrow, but we'll also send an email that contains each of these links in them for you. So next up we have Krista with Durango School District. Krista.
Okay, well, thank you for having me join today to speak about our collaborative invitation for bid for Farm to School. So in the next slide, you'll see that we are in the Southwest. We're small districts dealing with small farms. So we chose to do a collaborative bid with the 5 districts that you see. So as you can see in the next slide, most of our farms are under 20 acres. So we tried to develop a bid that would help our farmers understand that they could diversify their markets and realize the potential of what working with schools could do for them. So the goal was to actually have them see total usage numbers and hopefully plant more food for us. So in the next slide, in order for our process to be successful, we really felt that education was a big part of the process, and that was education on both sides. So that was farmers learning about schools and schools learning about what farmers have to do to make this process work. So the next slide shows how we accomplished this, and that was by creating a Farm to School conference back in November, and we did a small grant to get money to fund that. And what we did was we tried to address all the education issues. We wanted a day dedicated to how to work with schools, what's required, what's a bid, how do you respond, what is farm food safety, what is school food safety. And the next slide shows some handouts from that conference. So these are the things that we covered, and this is how we described the work of the day. And we had morning and afternoon sessions with panelists of experts and working groups. So the next slide describes those panels a little bit. So we separated into working groups with food service directors and local growers and producers around the tables, and did some breakout sessions. We had panels of experts talking about farm food safety and school food safety, just trying to get an entire day filled with what it would actually take to respond to this bid when they received it. And the next slide shows our self-assessment. So this self-assessment was written based on GAP protocol and is a requirement when they respond to the bid. So part of the education at the conference was we wanted all of the farmers to see this document and have a say into what worked and what didn't work for them within the document. And the stuff that came out of that conference, we actually changed the format, we simplified, we gave a place on there to say, see attached food safety plan if the questions weren't very specific and they wanted to respond further to them. And the next slide shows some more of that. So it covered traceability and everything that would happen on their farm. And so another piece of the education was about creating a farm food safety plan, which was also going to be a requirement of responding to the bid. And so this document, once it was filled out, also became an outline for farmers to create a food safety plan if they didn't already have one. The next slide shows our hot topic of geographical preference, and it shows how we chose to define geographical preference for the purpose of our bid. And so we chose to use a 250-mile radius of Durango, and that's what that map shows. So the next slide, we get into the bid a little bit, and we covered in the bid why, so actually let me take a step back. So this slide shows that we actually did a pre-bid conference. So we did the conference in November, and then we actually did a pre-bid conference in January. And it was at that pre-bid conference that we went over again why we do what we do, what's geographical preference, how do you respond to the bid, what do you do if you have more product or not enough product, things that they need to know in order to respond, cost per serving. So we talked a lot about how schools have to be able to know what their cost per serving is going to be when they respond to the bid, importance of delivered cost being listed in the bid, how they could possibly tier their pricing. The next slide shows pieces of the actual bid. So this is our definition of local, and you can see the unprocessed agricultural product that retains its inherent character as part of the geographical rule. And then again, we chose the 250-mile radius. And then the next slide shows how we chose to award. And we chose to award based on pricing, past performance, their ability to meet the requirements, their financial responsibility, and their ability to fill out the self-assessment and be able to respond with a food safety plan. And then the next slide shows how we chose to address the geographical preference. So if they met the rules or the definition of local for us, that we actually would award them preference points based on them being within that radius. Oh, this is the wrong slide, sorry. This one is about, yeah, that's the one. And then if you go back one, this was about awarding to more than one vendor. And that was actually because our farmers are small, and we just wanted them to know that they possibly couldn't fill the entire need, so it would give us the right to award to more than one. And then the next one was the preference points, which gives them a little leg up for being within our geographical 250-mile radius. And then the next slide shows how we defined our delivery instructions, and of course that would vary school district to school district, and our farmers are responding. They actually banded together, and their responses to our bid, they actually give us a little bit of a break depending on how they deliver to our locations. And then the next slide talks a little bit about variations within the bid, and this was important for our farmers to understand that they could bid any product that they grew, even if it wasn't within our list, or they could bid a product even if it didn't meet the exact specification of case size. This gave them the understanding, because this was pieces of it that our small farmers were confused about, is what if my cases are smaller, or so this gave them the opportunity to understand that they could respond with variations from what we were requesting. And then the next two slides show how we gave them our estimated quantities of fruits and vegetables that we were going to purchase. So this was, they were able to use this to determine what products they were going to respond with, and also for them to understand what the potential would be for the districts to purchase. And then really quickly, I'll just say that we had 20 farmers attend the conference in November, and of those 20, we had 13 of them respond to our bid. And we also have 10 new farmers out of that group. So thank you.
Krista, that's really exciting. It's been fun to hear you on so many of these webinars, and you're kind of going through some of the process and evolving it as you go along, and thank you for sharing that with everybody. I encourage those of you new to this to be sure to reach out to Krista. Go ahead.
And actually, I just wanted to mention one more thing. It was that the Colorado Department of Education was creating a template based on this bid that was going to be available at some point in the future for other people to access and use as a base to create a farm-to-school bid.
Great, and I know we'll all be working to promote that once it is available. So thank you for all your help with that and your willingness to share your experiences and now expertise. Next up, we have Tammy from Northern Colorado, who's going to talk about their co-op bid process for farm-to-school.
Thank you for inviting me today. We, in Thompson School District, we oversee nine school districts in our cooperative. And what we have found in the past that 2 districts were actively involved with Farm to School because we have many smaller school districts who also wanted to become involved with Farm to School. Last year we decided to delve into the idea of collaboratively bidding out produce because we were finding some challenges around knowing which farmers to access fresh produce and then how were we going to split those farms up so that they could get us the product that we needed. If you could go to the next slide, please. We started out by, we knew that many farmers did not have a formal food safety program, so we found this food safety checklist that you'll see on the next 3 slides that talk about the food safety program, personal hygiene, water, sewage, manure, and animal access and pest control. We decided that with this best practices, this form, we were able to help our farmers better understand what our food safety and sanitation requirements were. And this checklist really helped to cover those HACCP requirements for us. Then we met with farmers, or we sent out a bid. All of our co-op sends in the amounts of produce and the kinds of produce that we want to buy annually. We send out a bid in January, February timeframe with our anticipated usage for next year so that the farmers really do know what we're interested in growing, and they can start to anticipate what products we're going to be purchasing or would prefer to purchase from them locally during the next school year. Then in April, coming up real shortly, we are going to have a pre-bid conference. This pre-bid conference will go over our bid language, and then we'll talk about which farms can really service which schools. We find that if we discuss that early, then we have better organization once the fresh produce bid has been awarded. We do market to schools our fresh produce that we do purchase so that our students know that we are buying fresh produce and what we're buying. There seems to be a growing interest around our student population. Next slide, please. We gather up all of the different fruits and vegetables that the different schools want to procure, and we come up with a monthly estimate, and you'll see that on the next slide. The monthly estimates, we have a spreadsheet where we calculate all of the planned usage for the 9 school districts, and so our estimated usage will be on this particular slide so that farmers can really tell if they would be able to meet our needs. Sometimes we do have to purchase from multiple farmers, And the farmers, because they better understand our needs from the pre-bid conference, they're able to work together to deliver our schools the quantities that we hope to receive from them. And that's a real formal process that we go through in northern Colorado. As I said, we're relatively new at this, and so we just continue to improve on an annual basis.
Thanks, Tammy. It's helpful to see the different perspectives and views that are being taken by each of the different areas of the state. Next up, we've got Paula from Canyon City.
Thank you, Wendy. Thanks for having me today. And I am here. There you see my contact information. Some of the information that's on my PowerPoint may not be really easy to read today. So just know that that information will be posted on the Farm to School website. And then also keep my email handy. Feel free to email me with any questions or concerns or help you might need. I'm very good at responding to that, and I'm always anxious to help other districts proceed with the Farm to School programs. And then, of course, my website there is a lot of information in my archives on things that we have done and how we've gotten where we are. So feel free to take that information and contact me at any point in the future. So on the next slide, you'll see I'm basically here to represent, I guess what I'd call the small guy, because some of the smaller districts with really restricted resources, such as myself, I have 7 schools. I'm restricted on the resources I have to help me do these type of things, as well as my geographical area and the farmers that are really available to me. So what I've done, and I worked with CDE to create really just a simple quote system. I solicit quotes from my local farmers, and I really only have about 4 of those. So it's a very simple process. And as you can see on here, and again, you can pull up the larger letter on the website at a later date, but I really I have a quote letter for my produce and a quote letter for my ground beef, which I use locally from a couple different suppliers. And to highlight what these say on here, really what I'm asking for is just, I ask them to tell me what fruit and vegetables they have available at what times of the year. And then I just incorporate those into my menu. So as opposed to me giving them my usage, I just tell them, hey, what do you have available and what are the prices and when are those items available? And then I incorporate those into my Harvest of the Month program. I give my kitchen supervisors a lot of flexibility on putting out the fresh fruits and vegetables that we are able to get locally, as opposed to menuing, snow peas, then there's no snow peas available. So I think that's what is somewhat unique about my program, is I kind of like put that ball in the court of my producers and my growers to let me know what they can get me at certain times of the year. And then along the other lines in this letter, obviously I require them, I put down delivery instructions. I do require them to have a written safety and product handling procedures before I will consider their product. I do reserve the right that it's not all based on price. It is obviously based on possibly if they have the items I need and their delivery procedures and so on and so forth. And then the last couple things on these letters, one is that it gives the time frames of when I need it delivered, so it does get pretty specific from that standpoint. But it's very simple. It works for me. It works for our local growers, and it's just really, I think it's a great resource for some of you people out there that may just be thinking, oh my gosh, this whole process is too overwhelming. There's no way I can do it. You can start small, and then you grow based on your comfort level, but every little bit helps. And it's very seasonal for me. I can't necessarily offer the fresh grown farm produce year round, but I do it several months. The ground beef I'm also getting locally. Actually, I'm getting that from the Colorado Correctional Industries, and it's kind of a neat story that I will get to at the end, that can kind of show you how marketing your program can help your program grow. It was really something very unique that happened to me a few months ago. So this is the nutshell of what I do, how I get my bids, how I get my prices, and how I determine what products I'll be able to put on my menu. Then on the next slide, really it just shows what we do. We actually, these are from my three producers that I use. The lady on the right-hand side is actually Britt. She's a third-generation farmer here in Canyon City, and that's my assistant next to her. And we actually, or I go as often as I can, but my assistant actually goes out to the farms. Once they tell us what they can get, she checks the quality, she purchases it, and then they deliver it. And then the guy with the apples is kind of a cute story. He's actually my neighbor, but he runs an orchard. So it's a small town down here in Canyon City. But it's limited, but we have a very good relationship, a very close relationship with them. And then in the next slide, you'll see just some fun that we have with the kids. We try to incorporate the local produce into different celebrations, the nutrition education. I work very closely with our wellness coordinator and our school health teams, so they help with that nutrition piece. And as you can see, that squash on the right-hand side was actually came from one of our local producers. It was a very fun day for the kids, and we did that. But it's important for those kids to know where their fruits and vegetables are coming from. And then on the next slide is basically this is what we do every day in our cafeterias. We have the fresh produce available every single day, and everyone always asks me, how do you get children to eat healthy? And I say you give them access to it. And that's what we attempt to do with our locally grown produce and our commercially purchased produce in addition. So kind of to back up just a shade before we go on to the next slide, I really just want to kind of maybe walk you through the few steps that I do. First thing I do is I send out that quote letter that you saw. Then I receive the quotes back along with their product list. And then my assistant or myself, based on what the information we get back from our producers, we place the order based on the availability. And then we receive those orders in my central warehouse. And then my kitchen supervisors order based on what we have available. And I give them a lot of flexibility. And we just serve fresh fruits and vegetables every day. And so that's how we can incorporate what I have available to me. And then on the next slide is part of my marketing. On the right-hand side is we put signs up. We let the kids know where their produce is coming from. The farmers have been very cooperative in coming out and maybe setting up a stand in the middle of the cafeteria and letting kids sample some of the apples or the cauliflower or whatever it might be. And then on the left-hand side is my my logo, which is anybody who knows Canyon City School District food service knows that's my logo, and it really does promote not just farm to school, but the fresh fruit and the fresh vegetables. And I actually have a van on the next slide that I drive around town for my catering, any deliveries I make. And it was because of this van and articles in the paper, I worked very closely with the local media about my farm to school. And it was because of these two things combined that I got a phone call one day from El Pomar. It's a foundation here that does a lot of funding of school initiatives. And the short of it was, because of that newspaper, he read it, he called me. I'm now working with the Department of Corrections, and they're looking at establishing some greenhouses just for my school district, for my school to be able to grow what we want and put that on the table for our children. And so I think that's a really exciting initiative that I'm involved in, and I'm excited to see it grow. So I think not just doing this is important, but marketing it and letting, especially you small districts, let everyone out there know you're doing it, because you never know who's going to see you on the internet or pick up a paper and give you an opportunity to make your program grow. And with that, like I said, if you'd like to contact me, please do. I'd be glad to help anyone out in any way that I can.
Great. Thanks so much, Paula. What a great and inspiring story. In that, really, you're seeing a range of how some smaller districts have come together, but also how a small district has gone at it on its own, and how you're able to build on things, which I think is to the benefit of everyone, to the kids, to the schools, and most importantly, perhaps to the farmers. So with that, I'm going to now turn it over to a sort of former farmer who has been one of the leaders of Farm to School in Colorado. Karen McManus has now taken a position with the Food Bank of Larimer County, and she is going to give us some parting words.
Thank you, Lisa. As a Colorado producer who has been active in Farm to School for the past 5 years, it is really fantastic to see how Colorado is evolving in Farm to School and how each district is really doing it differently. I wanted to just touch on 4 key points that I think are important from the producer point of view. And the first one of those is to always think food safety. You need to understand the requirements the districts have in place regarding food safety, and these are always shared at the pre-bid meetings. So I really encourage producers to attend those pre-bid meetings. There's a lot of questions that can be answered there. You want to create a food safety plan specific to your operation and share it with your coworkers. Check it regularly so that you know that you really are following what is in your plan. My second point that I wanted to offer out is to communicate often. Check in with the districts regularly to see if they are happy with your product and if it is holding up. Sometimes it may be necessary to adjust delivery times to be sure your produce is staying fresh. Don't assume that you need to deliver in the same tax requirements that you would for a wholesale customer, but ask your district how they're using that product. You may find that you can save both time and money by having these kinds of conversations up front. And then also ask if the students are eating this produce. You might find that you need to choose different varieties that are much more appealing to the young taste buds. And remember that your name is associated with your product, and you want to do everything to make sure that you're putting the highest quality out there, giving the school districts your best. The third point I wanted to talk about today was to embrace the opportunity. Being involved with Farm to School is a great thing for the schools, for the community, and for your business. Take advantage of this with your non-school district customers and find out, when they find out that you're selling to schools, they want to do business with you. Encourage the districts to advertise that they're buying from you and from your farm through signage in the lunchroom, through newsletters, maybe bus signs and other media. And remember that it's not only students that are eating in the cafeteria, but parents, teachers, and other staff are also eating there. And your customer base has potential to grow with each meal served. And finally, I just wanted to say that it's a great way to share the wealth. Everyone needs to know where our food comes from and how it's grown. And farmers have the opportunity to share their knowledge by offering their time as farmers in the classroom, by helping out with school gardens, and by inviting school groups to come out to the farm. It's a win-win situation for everyone, including you.
Thanks, Karen. That was great. And I think we need to write those down and make sure that we share them with everybody. So the parting words that we've taken to sharing on these calls, I think ring true as you listen to each of our speakers. It's really important that we celebrate our successes no matter how small, and that we keep striving for further excellence. So for those of you who haven't gotten started yet, we encourage you to reach out to those who have and get some help from them. And I hope that those of you who have made some starts, that this has been helpful in how you move forward. We will provide you with this list of resources in a follow-up email, and I do want to give time for questions now. We've received a few that I'll turn to, but if you could please start writing any questions that you may have, and if you do know who you want them directed to, if you could call that out, that would be extremely helpful. The first question is directed to Wendy. She had mentioned that there are grants for farm-to-school equipment and materials, and this participant expressed a concern that what's really needed is money to subsidize and pay the difference between farm-to-school procurement, which is usually healthier, and commodities or the other foods they buy. Any chance of grants for that?
This is Wendy. I'm going to give a sort of quick answer, and then I'm going to pass it back to you, Chris, to actually. But so my quick answer is there are some programs that exist, and for those of you out there in school districts know this better than I do, but such as the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Grant Program, which is dependent on your free and reduced percentage of your free and reduced meal participation rates. And also the Department of Defense Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, which is a commodities program, does provide fresh fruit and vegetables. They also have a geographic preference written into their program on paper, so that there is an opportunity at least to be encouraging that program to be sourcing more local produce for their fresh fruit and vegetable program. To the point, I think, of the question, though, which is really about sort of incentivizing the kind of foods maybe we're talking about wanting to see more of, it's a great question, that we haven't fully addressed in Colorado. There are some other states that have actually increased their reimbursement rates for school districts that do source locally. Oregon and California come to mind, and anyone can follow up with me for more information on other state models. It's something we're beginning to look at here, and I'm going to punt this back to Krista for two reasons. One, as a food service director, Krista can probably comment more on any financial tools they have used, if any, but also as a Farm to School task force member, Krista, if you could also comment on if the task force is looking at sort of this financial incentive issue at all.
I'm not sure about the Farm to School task force looking in that specific direction. There's currently grant funding for infrastructure for processing, but I think what you're talking about is more for funding the purchasing, correct?
Correct.
Is that, yeah, so right now I don't believe that there's funding for purchasing, but I will make one comment about receiving the bids back from some of my farmers. And when you look at let's say I use DOD produce, so if I look at my cost per serving, you know, I might get 113 count apples and my staff might be serving a whole apple. But if I look at my organic fresh apples that come from my farmers, it's not cost effective to serve the whole apple, but it is cost effective to serve it in the proper portion size. And so that's an education piece for your staff that, you know, you really can't expect to get more money to purchase local food. You really have to figure out how to redirect the money that you have to purchase. So you're still purchasing apples, whether it's from a farmer or whether it's commercial. You just have to figure out how you're going to use those same funds. And so for me, when I'm looking at the responses from my farmers, one way to decide that is, you know, how could I make that portion cost less?
Thanks, Krista. I think that's very helpful, and one of those key things that you learn as you go through, and a reminder to keep an open mind and be creative and thoughtful in working through this as you're making the changes early on, especially. Our second question goes to the school district. Will the school district share pricing information from the winning bids? I don't know if this person is asking specifically right now if you share information, or what I think probably is the feedback loop. Do you, and we could hear from each of you all, do you provide that information back to farmers as part of the learning process?
So this is Krista. We were planning to, once the awards were made, I'm going to have a spreadsheet that's on the website that shows what products were awarded to what farmers at what price. So that is public information.
Great. Paula or Tammy, do either of you want to respond?
This is Tammy.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Paula.
This is Paula, and I have such a limited market that I really end up purchasing a little bit from everyone. But if a farmer asks what I'm paying for it from their competitor or even from DOD, I will share that information. It's not top secret information at all.
And this is Tammy. I would agree with that. All of the bid pricing is public information, but by statute we're required to share that if asked.
Great. Thank you all for that. The third question is a reminder, this is my last question that I have submitted, so if you have any questions, if you would please start typing them in now, I'd appreciate it. The last question I guess I'll give to Karen, but I think that food service directors may want to respond to as well. How do the local farmers feel about students growing their own produce?
I would say that in my experience in working in school gardens, we love to see the kids getting involved in growing their own produce, because we find that they take such pride in growing that produce that then they're willing to eat new foods, and that's a really great thing. Also, we need to remember that these students might be our future farmers, and so learning to grow produce and where it comes from at an early stage is just a wonderful opportunity for them.
Great, thank you. I don't know, Krista, Paula, or Tammy, if you have anything to add.
We have farmers, student gardens are just starting in Thompson School District, and I know that I've seen a lot of enthusiasm around the concept of growing their own food and then being able to taste their own food. I think that's a great learning experience. I think children get a better idea of where food comes from, and they do get quite excited about the whole farming process, which does incorporate a lot of different learning skills.
Great, thanks. The next question, and now our last question, unless somebody types up another one. We've got two. Thank you. Keep them coming. Can student-grown produce be served in your school? And I'm going to have Karen respond to that, and then if anybody else wants to jump in.
It really depends on the school district. We're finding that more and more school districts are allowing this to happen. I know that in Greeley, for sure, that they are doing that, and I think Wendy wanted to add something to that.
So, yeah, as Karen said, there's districts that are actively doing this. Just in terms of resources, DPS actually has a protocol in place about using school-grown, garden-grown produce in their cafeteria, and their protocols are on coloradofarmtoschool.org and probably many other places. We have a case study at coloradofarmtoschool.org specifically on school gardens, and the third last page of that case study, directs you to all sorts of the DPS's model protocols, other resources about using school garden produce. Also, Slow Food Denver recently, just a few weeks ago, held an all-day conference looking at school gardens and youth farmers markets, and they shared a lot of great resources such as protocols and procedures and policies around using school-grown produce. Their resources will soon be up on coloradofarmtoschool.org, and I think they're also up at lunchlessons.org, and you could probably find them through Slow Food Denver. So just to flag that there are models out there, it is possible.
Does anybody want to add, any of the school food service directors want to add there?
Well, this is Krista. I'll just say we do use our produce from our school gardens in our kitchens, and they tend to use that produce mostly on their salad bars. And the kids get really excited about food that they've harvested, and they really want to eat that when it's on their salad bars.
Great, thanks.
And this is Paula, and while I don't really have any school gardens yet, in the one photo you saw where we had the 20-pound squash, and we had the children help us crack it open and learn about it, what it was, and then we took it back to the kitchens and prepared it. They got really excited about that. So I'm looking forward to the day where I can get some school gardens gone, and I do agree with Krista that it really generates some excitement with the kids and for your program.
And this is Tammy, and right now our school gardens aren't formalized enough to be able to utilize fresh produce in our kitchens. However, we do have a HACCP policy or a food safety policy in place, and we're anticipating the day when we do have larger farms or larger student gardens coming into our kitchens.
Great, and this is Lisa from LiveWell again, and I'm going to chime in on some of our perspective that has been touched on by everybody a little bit, but can't really reiterate enough of the importance of making sure kids want to eat this food, as well as you all within the farmers and the school food service directors providing it. And so the school gardens have been an incredible way in which to do that. Speaking as a mom whose school doesn't bring the produce in, but still seeing the kids engaged in their garden is tremendous and really does drive their behavior not only at school but at home. So it really is so important and really exciting and fun to see with the kids. I think it's what makes our work so rewarding. So more time for people to ask some questions. The next one I have is regarding farmers. Are farmers required to have insurance, and are there resources to help the farmers afford the insurance?
If a farmer is selling wholesale, retail, they should have product liability insurance in place. As far as resources go, I would suggest checking with the Colorado Department of Ag and your local extension office, and possibly even Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, to see if there's any help for something like that.
I'm going to just jump in really quick. There was a specific question. This is Wendy Peters-Muschetti. There's a specific question about programs in Eagle County, and my short answer is yes. We actually just recently received a nomination for a Farm to School champion from Eagle County, and I'm not pulling that up very quickly right now, but if you want to know who that person, what program or person was nominated, again, you can email me. My email is on this webinar, wendy@wpmconsulting.net. And I can get you that information.
Great, thank you. And one more you might want to comment on, Wendy, that I think has been discussed a little bit. This is somebody who joined late, so very understood, but good to wrap up with. Is it possible to participate in multiple school districts which are active in the Farm to School program?
Yes, and I'm assuming this is coming from a producer or producer perspective. The answer is absolutely yes, and Karen can probably answer that. Karen's a perfect example of someone who has sold to more than one.
Sure. And looking at even the Northern Colorado bid, you'll see that there are quite a few school districts as part of that bid. So a farmer can pick and choose what works best for them regarding their geographic locale. And I know I have sold to both Weld County schools and St. Vrain schools at the same time, so certainly that is an option.
Thank you. We don't have any more questions. I'll give just a few seconds to see if there are any last that come in. But I want to thank all of our presenters. It really, truly is exciting to hear all the progress that's happening around Farm to School and the opportunities that we're seeing for the coming school year with the bid process that's going on. It really is very exciting. There are lots of smiles in this room. So that, let's see, we've got one more question, and I think this one will be our last in the interest of time. Are there safeguards in place to see if the produce is coming from the farm and not resold from other locations?
This is Karen once again. The school districts are choosing to go out and do farm tours when necessary, and also as a producer, I encourage the districts to come out and visit the farms. So that is one area that they are making sure that it's coming directly from the farm.
Great, thank you. So thank you again to all of our presenters and to all the great questions we got. And as a reminder, we will be sending a link to the recording for this webinar. It will also have a link to the slides so you can get them, and we will include in our email everyone's contact information and a list of all the links that were referenced throughout this presentation. And we, again, really appreciate everybody's participation. If you have any suggestions for additional topics you'd like covered in the future or any questions that weren't answered, you can feel free to direct them to anyone, any of the email addresses that are listed, or you can send it just in response to the email invitation that you received. So thanks so much, and I hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon. It's absolutely beautiful here in Denver, and I hope it is across the state. We're ready for spring. I'm ready to start growing some stuff. So thanks, everybody.